Paul here from My Perfect Failure, where we bring you real life stories that turn your failures into successes and your setbacks into opportunities. Ever thought about building a multi-million-dollar business from scratch without giving up control or your sanity? Sharon K. Gillenwater did just that, bootstrapping her company to a $25 million exit without giving up a dollar of venture capital. So what's her secret? Stick around, because in this episode of My Perfect Failure, Sharon shares exactly how she achieved this, the obstacles she faced, and the strategies that helped her scale with soul.
Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today, I'm super excited as I have another fantastic guest for you. So my guest today is a tech startup founder, business executive, and speaker whose mission is to demystify entrepreneurship and make it more accessible to everybody. She is the author of Scaling with Soul, How I Built and Sold a 25 million tech company. Her book chronicles how she built and scaled and sold Boardroom Insiders. So a very, very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, Sharon Gillenwater. How are you, Sharon?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. When I found you online somewhere, and I thought I need to connect with Sharon because I love the story. I love anybody. I love entrepreneurship. I love people that have lived the dream, have gone through, I guess, the ups and the downs of entrepreneurship. But what I guess compelled me to contact you was because I love the fact that you're very honest and transparent. You're giving everybody that comes across you, whether it be online or reading your books, some of the tools and the tricks and things that we can do to try and be successful, or even have a better way of interpreting some of the difficult moments that will undoubtedly come during an entrepreneurship journey. So where I was keen to start, I'm always keen to start with entrepreneurs about how they got into entrepreneurship. Was it something that you always wanted to do, or did it just happen?
It just happened. I floundered around in my 20s, not really knowing what I wanted to do. I worked as a magazine writer and a freelance writer for most of that decade, and ultimately went to graduate school because I didn't know what to do with my life. And when I came out, I moved from Southern California to San Francisco. And San Francisco in the late 90s was startup central, and I just got sucked into it. And I discovered that I loved it. I loved working at in small entrepreneurial companies where you could have a big impact as one person, and an immediate impact. There's nowhere to hide in an
Yeah.
entrepreneurial company. You have to contribute or you'll be exposed immediately. And so I really liked that. I'm a hard worker. I have a strong work ethic, and it was just a great experience. And after having my first child, the thrill of taking the bus downtown every day to go to work wore off, and I wanted to be closer to home. And at the same time, I was having some discussions with my sister-in-law who had an idea. She has a great entrepreneurial mind, but she was working as a corporate executive at Sony at the time. And so she basically handed me an idea and a domain name and even a little bit of startup capital that she had from selling another domain name. And I got started with a company called Fidget, and that was back in 1999. I raised venture capital for that company, and it killed the company. So when I started my second startup, my successful one, which I started in 2008, I was bound and determined to not raise any venture capital and have that pressure and that oversight from a group of people that I felt didn't understand my business.
Yeah. Okay. So there's lots to unpack there. So I guess everything you said intrigues me. I'm keen to go back to you got into the startup land, which was, I guess, different from what you'd done before, and it's very fast paced and everybody's got to contribute because if you don't, then you get exposed pretty quickly. Was that very different from what you'd experienced before? And if so, how did you find that exciting? It can be difficult for lots of people that don't have that background to adjust to somewhere where there's no hiding place. You really have to contribute.
Yeah, well, I never really worked in a large enterprise or for a large organization. I guess the closest I came was when I worked for an outpost of the Baskin Robbins company when I was
All
15
right. Okay.
years old, scooping ice cream. That was a big company. But if I really look back to all of my different jobs, even in my 20s and even in my teens, they were all kind of entrepreneurial small businesses, relatively small. And so going into a startup in San Francisco was not that different, except it was in the middle of the big, first internet boom, which just heightened everything. And there was just an enormous amount of money coming into that world and being spent. So that was different from my previous entrepreneurial pursuits, which really had to do with, working for small publications or, even freelance writing and cobbling together a living in my 20s by, doing some articles for publications over here, doing some press releases, doing some corporate writing. Writing doesn't pay a lot. And so you have to cobble together lots of different types of clients to make a living. So I did have that survival instinct that I was, that muscle that I was exercising all through my 20s. I was just, hustling for gigs. And when you have a startup, whether you work at a startup or you're starting your own, you do have to hustle quite a bit
Mm,
because nobody's heard of you.
yeah.
And you have to convince all kinds of people, whether they be partners, customers, people you want to hire, that you're worthy of their attention and potentially investment. So that's what, upon reflection, I see that through line through my career. I'm pretty good at that, even though I'm an introverted person who tends to undersell what she has to offer.
There's so many, as you're talking there, it's just making me think about all the moving parts that have to be fused together. And I guess some will come easily because I guess we don't know everything as well within a startup. You can't know everything. So different situations will make us realize that we need this. Or I just researching you, I believe that at one point you had a mentor or a coach. I think you talk about mindset that helped with that type of thing. So that that definitely helps. And just a quick question around you go into the startup and then the tech startup, and then you over a period you have that conversation, and then you think about your own startup. What was that like for you? I guess mentally adjusting from being part of a startup, then going to creating your own startup. Did you have to adjust mentally, or from a mindset perspective? Or did you just seize the moment just in terms of actually this is an amazing opportunity, excitement, adrenaline just took you on that journey?
Yeah, it was easy to make the jump since I had been working essentially in a startup environment, acquiring those types of skills for a long time. It was immediately saw my skills gap. I was having to do all the writing for the website and the content, the um, accounting, which I had no experience doing, um, some things that were a little bit technical, and I'm not a technical person. So I was scrambling a little bit to figure out how to do the things that I wasn't great at, because when you first get started, especially if you're bootstrapping, you don't have a lot of money, you can't just bring in those experts from the
Hmm.
beginning. You have to do a lot yourself, as much as you can yourself. And they're, the difference between today and when I started that first one in 99 is there are so many digital tools that make all of those
Yeah.
things a lot easier, whether it is accounting or HR, or it was astonishing to me to look at some of the digital tools that became available in the last 10 years that helped us run Boardroom Insiders so easily, from Slack to Gusto to Zero to Giraffe. I mean, there are all these very niche tools that actually can work very well together. And that's why the barriers to entrepreneurship are lower than they've ever been because of all these digitals available to people, including, low code, no code development tools that allow you to build your products, your MVPs without a lot of expense or technical support.
Does that excite you for people that are budding entrepreneurs now, that they've got this dearth of not dearth of opportunities, they've got an array of opportunities that, in terms of tools, that weren't around when you started Boardroom Insiders? And I guess it's maybe us having the awareness that these tools are here. If we use them the right way, then we've got, good foundations to get going.
It is exciting. It's very exciting. I think the challenge becomes there's so many available that
Yeah.
it's figure out what is the best tool for each different use case that you need. Right now everyone's talking about AI, and it's just getting started, right? And so I was starting to dive into that, even though I don't have a company right now. I'm just curious. So I took some classes on a educational platform called Section, and they have great AI content and frameworks, and it's very high level. So it talks about here's what AI is really good at doing now, and within these different use cases, here are the tools that we believe are the best for each of these different cases. And it gives you a strategic framework for using AI in your business. And so I think as entrepreneurs, we need to educate ourselves through platforms like that to help us narrow down the broad array of tools out there. Because if you have a company, all the salespeople are going to find you, and you're going to have people beating down your door, making lots of promises that their tools deliver. And it's very important to go outside of that ecosystem to fellow entrepreneurs or experts like the ones teaching on Section to figure out the right direction that you should go. Otherwise, you can burn through a lot of time and money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is really confusing because without the trained ear, or without maybe somebody that we trust that is maybe further on in the curve than us, it's very difficult to isolate. It can be very confusing about what should I use, where do I go with this? And like you say, you can get into that trap where you spend a lot of time, valuable time or money, which invariably for startups is in very short supply. So so tools like Section, I might try and find that and put a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, in
Oh,
fact, I'll add one more thing about Section, and I'm not associated with them.
mm,
I like what they're doing. I talked about this AI thing I think on one of my TikTok videos, and I mentioned, someone asked a question on the feed. They said, where did you take these classes? So I mentioned Section and I provided a link, and the person who asked the question came back and said, thank you so much for telling me about this because I was able to apply and get a scholarship.
really,
That made
amazing.
me really happy. In fact, I just made a note. I want to make a video about that because, one of the things that bootstrapping entrepreneurs don't have a lot of money. Now, Section, it's not that expensive. It's like $1,000 for a year, unlimited classes, and then they have add-ons like you can get an AI MBA, for example. But for a bootstrapping entrepreneur, $1,000 is
Yeah,
$1,000.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, I would recommend people check that out and apply for the scholarship.
No, that sounds amazing. I wasn't familiar with Section, so I definitely will have a delve into that. Okay, I wanted to ask around, so bootstrapping. So first company, I think you mentioned that you had equity support there, and then the new business, Boardroom Insiders. I guess was that a deliberate play? Sorry, not to get any capital investment for that based on the experience you had before.
Yes and no. I mean, it was deliberate at first, and then the reality hits you where, oh, I need money to build this thing. I had built kind of a shell of a product on my own, and then when it started to get real, I realized I needed to build a proper database product, and I didn't have the money to do it. So I did take some angel money from a personal friend who had just sold his company. He had enjoyed his first exit, so he had a lot of money. And I was having a conversation with him just about my idea. And he really liked the idea. And he said, "You should go build this." And I said, "Well, I don't have the money to build it." And he immediately said, "I'll write you a check." And so that was my first encounter with angel investors. And that helped me build the first product. But every entrepreneur, if you're lucky enough to see some success, you'll get to a point where you need money to build
Mm.
something that customers are asking for. You'll need money to build something to take your business to the next level. And that's when the specter of venture capital starts creeping in, and you think, well, maybe I should reconsider. So that did happen a couple times in my business, but I was not willing to devote all of my time to raising money. I would always default towards spending more time with the customers, spending more time improving the product myself rather than spend all my time raising money, because I never got great feedback from venture capitalists. They didn't like our model. Our production model relied a lot on human beings. And at the time, and still, they were more attracted to data scraping because it allows you to keep your costs low. Now, the output tends to be crap, but it seems like they don't really care. In fact, I had venture capitalists tell me, stop talking about the quality of your data and your product. Nobody cares. Those exact words. So they really don't care about that. They're in it to make money, and they're not interested in businesses that are not going to scale massively. But that doesn't mean that as an entrepreneur, if you have a niche product like I did, that you're unworthy. You can create a you know a group of raving fans who are willing to pay you for that product. And so that's the direction we went in. We had that little bit of angel money to build, and then we self-funded with revenue after that, because we had very eager and happy customers who then referred us to other customers, or who then left their company and went to another company and took us with them. So that's
Okay.
how we grew. And it's very hard, especially when you live in the Bay Area and in California, to not have your head turned constantly by,
Mm.
oh, this person raised this much money, this person raised this much money. And you can feel like you're not bona fide because you haven't been funded to that degree. But you've got to let that go and just stay focused. Because here's what I've learned in the last few months since my videos went viral. I made a video, which you might have seen, about I sold my company for 25 million. Here's how much I walked away with. And I
Yeah,
broke
I've
it all
seen that.
down
Yeah.
in taxes. And the reason I did that is because when I was working as an entrepreneur and someone had an exit, my partner and I would just, hey, how much do you think he got? How much do you think he got? And it was always a he, right? How
Yeah.
much do you think he got? Well, I know he had this much and blah, blah, blah. So there's all this wasted spinning, like, because everyone's so curious. They're afraid to ask, and everyone wants to know. So I just put it out there. And even at that point, which was January, I had no realization that an entrepreneur could raise 50 million or 20 million and sell for 200 million. I sold for 25, and they could actually walk away with less than I did.
Really?
Yeah, that's why my video went viral, because venture capitalists and founders were reposting it. And it was hilarious because they were saying, this woman is the example of, someone who really knows what they're doing. And when it comes to an exit, and I thought, I didn't know anything. All I knew is they wouldn't give me money, right? So the comments and the analysis of my video were a complete revelation to me, that someone could raise 20, 50 million, sell for 100, 200 million, and walk away with less than I did for a
Mm.
$25 million exit. So I've always maintained that bootstrapping is the best way to go for an entrepreneur if you can pull it off, because it's
Yeah.
very difficult. But man, to realize that it's not just about maintaining your integrity and your independence and being able to manage the business the way that you want to, and not having outside interference, and not having that pressure, and not, losing most of your equity. It's actually about better outcomes
Mm.
financially for entrepreneurs. So that was new to me. And I think that that might come as a surprise to other people as well.
So with that in mind, if you were, and I guess it can be you or it can be advice to entrepreneurs that will listen or watch this, that if somebody's got an idea and they think actually this is amazing, they've got the adrenaline, they've got the buzz, and they want to do something with this, should we be thinking about a possible sell outcome at the start so we can configure how we want to go, whether it's bootstrapping or whether it be VC funded?
Yes, you should. First of all, you need to think about what is the outcome that you want. And that doesn't mean that you'll necessarily achieve that or you won't change your mind, but it leads you to set up the business properly and run the business properly in those early days so that it will make it easier on you if you do exit. Now, my partner and I, he didn't come on until I had already had 2 years in the business. But when we joined up, we had a conversation about what do we want the outcome to be ideally. And we said, well, we want to sell it. We want to build something and then we want to sell it and be financially independent. But we also had the conversation about, but that may not happen. And if that doesn't happen, what's our second best outcome? And we agreed that the second best outcome would be to have a nice lifestyle business, which means that you have a business that you run. And at a certain point, you're able to pay yourselves really well because you've got it optimized. It's running like, a well-oiled machine, and it's throwing off a lot of cash. And so you can pay yourself 500,000, $1 million a year each, and you just keep it going, right? Um, and there are a lot of businesses like that. And I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who have businesses like that. And they're talking, some of them have even taken over from their parents. I have two women that I'm mentoring right now, and their dads started these companies back in the 80s or 90s, and now the daughters are taking over the companies. So you can pass it on to family if that's
Yeah,
what you want to do.
yeah.
Or you can do something like, sell it to your employees, or do a employee stock ownership program where the employees take it over. So there are lots of ways that you can build something of value beyond, just exiting for a big chunk of money. You can run it and pay yourself a lot of money along the way if you can afford to do that.
For you, I guess ultimately we know that you sold your business. What was that process like going from, I heard something, I think this was from you on one of your podcasts that, and I had no idea about this stat, but I think when you were going through your sale process, but I think your company that you hired take you through the process, there's 50% of these transactions don't actually happen. I don't know if that's the correct number, but I think that's what I heard. I'm doubting what I heard, but I think it was 50%.
Well, I don't know the actual number. Where that number came into play for me was my angel, who I was
Mm,
talking about earlier.
okay, okay.
He became a great advisor to me because he's done many of these deals. He's the CEO of a publicly traded company, so he has a ton of experience that was valuable to me. And he loves the deal. Like
Yeah,
even though he was about to go public, he was calling me like, "What's going on with your little $25 million deal?" It's little for in his world, but he was excited to be part of it. So when I first told him that I was running an M&A process, that's mergers and acquisitions process, he said, listen, oh, and we had an offer. He said, listen, 50% chance this doesn't happen.
okay.
Don't start spending your money. Don't change the way you're running your business. Keep everything the same as if it's not happening, because there's a 50% chance that it won't. So that was my
Okay,
reality
gotcha.
check
Okay.
for him and his experience. And I also, in doing reference checks for the mergers and acquisitions bankers that I was looking to hire, I had 3 that I checked references for. I talked to 12 different entrepreneurs, and quite a few of them had had failed deals before they actually had a successful exit. So, one of the things that can go wrong is you get approached by a private equity firm, or you get approached by a strategic acquirer, so somebody in your business or adjacent to it that might want to buy you and roll you into their business. Those have a high chance of failure because you're just negotiating with one potential buyer,
Okay.
right? And, what happens? They have a bad quarter, so they decide they're not going to do it, or they think that maybe your business isn't the right fit. So many of the entrepreneurs I talked to said, we tried to do a private equity deal on our own and it fell apart. So we kind of went dark for 18 months, and then we came out and we hired a banker to take us to market properly. It's very akin to real estate, because people they think, oh, I don't understand this. I knew nothing about it when I started, but my partner broke it down for me. He said, it's just like real estate. Your M&A banker is your realtor. Instead of selling your home, they're selling your company. But they do the same things realtors do. They come in, they look at all aspects of your business, they scrutinize it, they tell you what's wrong with it, where you could get tripped up, why a deal may not happen. They help you try to fix some of that stuff if they can for the short term. And then they put together a pretty marketing deck about your business. They have a list of 150 prospects that they know, and they go out to them and they talk to them about your business. And it's a funnel. They just whittle it down, and then they have offer day, just like in real estate. Offers are accepted starting on this date, between this date and this date. And they do that to create competition. So contrast that with the previous example of like, oh, I'm just negotiating with one buyer. You would not do that when you're selling a home, usually. And you shouldn't do it when you're selling a business. The bankers, a lot of entrepreneurs say, well, I don't want to pay the banker's fee. It's like, 4.5% of the transaction, but they earn their money. They really earn their
Yeah.
money, and they're way smarter than you when it comes to deals, because they do it every day. They have contacts within this universe of buyers, and they're incentivized to get that deal closed. And so they do earn their money, and they're well worth it, because they can A, ensure a deal closes, and B, make sure that you get the best price.
As you were talking, I was thinking around. Actually, can I ask this question initially? For people might be thinking you haven't asked this question. So, Boardroom Insiders, can maybe just give us a brief summary of what Boardroom Insiders is and what you were doing for your clients.
Yeah, Boardroom Insiders is a cloud-based SaaS company, software as a service company, in the marketing technology space, also known as MarTech for people in the
Yeah.
business. And what we did was we helped marketers and sellers be more relevant to C-suite decision makers. And when I say C-suite, I mean CEO, CFO, COO, CMO, anybody with a chief
Yeah. Yeah.
in their title. And the reason why that was needed is because in technology deals in particular, like we're talking like Cisco, Salesforce, Dell, Microsoft, those deals have gotten so big, 9-figure deals, maybe more, that they have attracted the scrutiny of the C-suite, because they are very expensive, and because now these tech deals, the technology gets infused across the entire company and is going to impact everyone, right? We've all read about terrible technology deployments going wrong, usually in a public sector organization. Here in San Francisco, they did this whole new tech system, took years and millions of dollars, and they're ripping it out. They never even turned it on. They're ripping it out and installing a new one. That's why. I mean, these deals are hugely consequential. So tech salespeople for quite some time now have been having to sell into the C-suite. And that's a completely different conversation. than when you're selling into like a vice president of data center or something, right? Those people like to talk tech and speeds and feeds. The business decision makers in the C-suite, they want to know, how is your solution going to accelerate my own sales or cut my costs, or and which competitors or relevant companies to me have you already worked with, and what did the outcomes look like there? So these are business impact conversations, and historically your average tech salesperson has not known how to have that kind of a conversation. And so what our platform did is it armed them with information on specific executives down to the person.
Okay.
So they knew what they cared about, what to talk to them about, what their hobbies were, how long they've been in the job, where they've worked before, so they can try to find those little icebreakers, points of relevance to have those conversations. Because really it starts with before you even get in touch with them. So one thing we heard over and over at Boardroom Insiders is a salesperson would say to us, I have been trying to get my foot in the door with this person for 2 years. I read some of your content about this person. I pulled out a little nugget of information and wrote them an email, and they got back to me in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I love that tech. I love the insights there. Because having been on the other side where you're trying to get in contact with people, it's incredibly tough. But when you do, you really want to be armed with something relevant to have a conversation with, because you only get a split second for the person that you're speaking to see absolute value. Because if you don't, then that can quickly go by the wayside. So definitely love the tech. So my next question was, so you built the business up, you go through the process, and then you find a buyer, agree the deal. What was that like emotionally to go from, because you built the business up, and then I guess you're going through the process where at the end of it, somebody else will be making the day-to-day decisions about your business.
It was tough. I mean, it was a roller coaster. You have the excitement of the deal, you have the excitement of the money, and the excitement of, wow, I built something. I started and built something that a public company thinks valuable enough to give me $25 million in cash. There's a lot of, that's a real high. And a public British company, so
Well,
not even
a British company.
Yeah, it was a British company that bought it. And that was amazing. But then you kind of have the lows, which are realizing that they don't want you as part of the deal. I was hoping they would, but in retrospect, I think it was good that I didn't stay. And then just going from, it was beyond the 14 years I ran the company, because I was refining the methodology and the approach and the frameworks even before that. So it was around 20 years of just working on this stuff really hard, nights, weekends, and then it just stops and you're out. And that was harder than I thought. And then the ensuing couple of years, I'm still in this, it's been less than 3 years, figuring out, well, what do I want to do now? And I assumed that I would be playing pickleball and traveling. And I'm doing a little bit of that, but that's not what I want to do. I discovered I like talking to other entrepreneurs. I like talking about business. I like learning about AI and the next crop of technologies. So that was difficult. And I'm still going through that. I now have all this content. I'm basically in the content business, targeting entrepreneurs, particularly bootstrappers. But this year, I'm figuring out, well, okay, well, what's the business model for that, right? If I'm going to be sitting at my desk for 6 hours a day or however long, I've got to have some revenue coming in for that time. Otherwise, I could just be out doing, things outside. So it's been a long process of experimentation and reflection.
Yeah, and I guess experimentation has to be done. Then hopefully we get those eureka moments that, I don't know, direct us on maybe a path that we can pursue, and then it will open up. So around So what I didn't mention, I think this will be quite useful to know for people that are bootstrapping their business and are looking to grow, is for the first 6 years of Boardroom Insiders, you had a job, so you didn't just start Boardroom Insiders and just quit everything. So you were working parallel.
Yes, and there's a lot of perspective on this. I mean, I have a book coming out at the end of May, and I tell the story about all the people, including my angel investor, who are like, stop doing the consulting. Just you need to focus on this. There's an argument, and guess what? When I stopped consulting, the business did kind of take off. But I think it was more complicated than that because we were so ahead of the market. Most of the market didn't understand what we were talking about for the first 4 to 5 years, and then it just took off. But how I looked at it is I was consulting with the very people who were the potential customers for my product, right? I was consulting with
Okay,
them in
okay.
meetings with them every single day, hearing them talk about their struggles reaching the C suite, hearing them talk about the types of very expensive
Mm,
events they were putting on to attract the C suite. And I was able to get my product in front of them every single day. So I think that the value of that was critical to getting the business off the ground too, and also shaping the perfect product. Because a lot of entrepreneurs, especially the well-funded ones, they'll, the ideas usually find them, and through VCs or contacts they met at Stanford or Harvard or wherever, and they go and they build something. And sure, they get potential customer input, but they're not embedded with those folks. I think the beauty of the bootstrapping entrepreneurs who maybe are from a non-traditional background is they come at it from a different angle. They tend to be the people who have been toiling away in a field for a while, and they keep seeing the same problem come up over and over. And they're thinking, well, why has nobody created something to solve this? And they do their due diligence and they figure out there's nothing there. And so they set out to build it themselves. And that's the kind of entrepreneur I think that is a good bootstrapper, because they can keep that, they can build while they still are working in the field,
okay.
and use it their job to validate, get the product in front of people, test it, do all kinds of things with it. And they're not working in a vacuum. Limited customer input.
Okay. Now that's an interesting parallel. I've never thought of it like that. So do you think there's a distinction between, maybe there is a distinction, but maybe there's a way to do it successfully to be successfully bootstrapped as an entrepreneur, as opposed to maybe other entrepreneurs that maybe don't view, maybe they don't really think about bootstrapping, but you might get some entrepreneurs that don't even think about bootstrapping, maybe because they think it's too difficult, or maybe they think that they'd rather get VC funded. I guess it's a big conversation, but I guess the parallel or the difference is quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all been kind of brainwashed into thinking that all entrepreneurs need VC funding, and they really don't. Again, they're looking for either massively scalable businesses or something that's highly capital intensive where the barriers to entry would be very, very high, like, building satellites,
Mm,
launching them into space, or, some major medical research breakthrough. So that's not the majority of entrepreneurs. I mean, especially in my space, a lot of us are just building little niche apps, basically, or platforms that are all digital. And you can do a lot these days without VC money. You can really bootstrap that. I mean, I'm mentoring another woman who never saw herself as possibly being an entrepreneur. She's worked in either business or nonprofits for 30 years, and we started talking December of 2022 about an idea she had. And I said, this is a great idea. You should do it. So we kept meeting, and, she has bootstrapped that thing. She had a product launched within 8 months, first customer within a year. And she's a full-fledged entrepreneur now. So that process just took a year to get her there. And watching what she's had access to in terms of the self-service tools, the digital tools that you can use to build your website, your product, and her creativity in, working with engineering students, for example, to help build her app. Why wouldn't you do it that way, especially if you are informed, as I am now, about how the outcome of venture funded, you think if you raise venture funding that your company is going to grow a lot faster and bigger, so you'll have a better financial outcome. But that's not the case. That's seldom the case, because you're not going to outsmart the money people. You're just not. They know what they're doing, and they do it every single day, and they're going to get paid first and the most.
Yeah, that could be quite demoralizing when you've done all this work. Then you get to the point where you're looking to sell. And then when you drill down on the numbers and you think, actually, for all this work, there's a big number that we're going to sell this for. But actually, once I've sold, what I get from it is, it's going to be okay, but it's going to be nothing like the number that we have in our head based on the blood, sweat, and tears that we put into our project or our business.
And you also have to look at what are the other things that you're having to do or missing out on by taking that money. So you have potentially the same or worse financial outcome. You have a board with some people on it who may or may not understand or care about your business the way you do, and are pressuring you to do things in a way that you don't want to do. You have to constantly be producing decks and reports and all of this stuff and going through the hoops, jumping through hoops for your investors. I didn't have to do any of that. Even my angel was super hands off, and we later took 25,000 from two other angels who are also personal friends. Totally hands off. And what I tell people is, like, angel money is great, but there are three things that you should look for in an angel. The first thing is they're already so wealthy that they're not going to miss the money or worry about it. Number two, they're seasoned entrepreneurs themselves, so they know exactly what you're going through. And because of that, they tend to just let you do your thing and leave you alone. And the third thing is they'll give you advice when you ask for it.
Okay.
Michael, my first angel, taking his company IPO, public company CEO, super busy, 2 kids. But he would always take my call. And the only time I called him is when I really needed some advice. So he would always take my call, give me great advice. And then even when the deal was in progress, he proactively checked in with me and called me regularly, which was super valuable, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know and you're missing something huge. And he would just ask me questions and say, well, what about this? What about this? And I'd be like, oh, hadn't thought about that. 2 days before our deal was supposed to close, he called me at like 8 o'clock at night. He's like, so what's going on? He said, do you have your employment agreement yet? And I said, no. And he said, what? And he said, your deal's not going to close. He said, either they don't want you, or they're, idiots, or, there's something wrong here. He said, why haven't your lawyers brought this up? Your lawyers should be bringing this up. So we immediately called our lawyers and we got that straightened out. And one thing his line of questioning, I said, well, does this really, it's going to work out. Does this really matter? And he said, well, if your deal closes on Wednesday, Sharon, what are you going to do on Thursday? And I said, well, I'm going to get up and run the company. Things aren't going to change that quickly. And he said, really? He said, how much are you getting paid? Do you have health insurance? He's like, because all that stuff could end on Wednesday. And if you don't have an agreement, you're not protected. So things like that, you don't know what you don't know. So ideally, if you're going to take any money, it's from an angel like that who can really advise you, but also be hands off and respectful that you know your business best.
Yeah. And that's amazing advice, because I can imagine for entrepreneurs, when you're because I can imagine lots of pressurized moments that were experienced during the journey. And when the cash flow is challenged or light, and we're looking at investment, sometimes I would imagine you'll probably know this more than me. Sometimes we may not make the best decisions in terms of that angel investment or the VC investment we get. And then you go down that road where you've got somebody that wants to report every week about what's going on here, and you take up more time doing that stuff than you do actually the thing that you love, which is running your business.
Yeah, and I've been in that situation with my first startup. We took 3 million in venture capital, and we raised it in the midst of the first .com crash. I couldn't believe we did it, but we pulled it off. I mean, they must have just been scrambling to put money somewhere, because sometimes if they don't put it somewhere, they have to give it back to their investors. So we got 3 million in April of 2000. The NASDAQ was already crashing. And then it became a worse and more prolonged crash than people might have expected. So the company tried to renege on that investment. Well, guess what? We've already signed a year's server hosting contract. We've already signed a lease for a new office. We've already hired 10 people. So when you get that money, and they were contractually obligated to fund it, but then they tried to renege, and they were going to try to sue us for fraud, which was a joke. But you've already incurred all these expenses. And so that's when it kills the business, because you basically have to shut it down, because without that money, you can't continue to operate. Now, I could have bootstrapped that business. In retrospect, I was just tired. That's why I took the money. And I also thought I had to, because
Okay.
that's what you do, right? So, having gone through that experience gave me a lot more resilience the second time around, because I remembered what had happened and how bad it was. And I also had reflected and thought I could have kept that thing going. I probably could have kept it going through the whole crash, because the costs were very low, but they weren't low when we, started scaling up.
And I guess what you have done, you've learned from that because Boardroom Insiders, you took a different route. I'm
Yeah.
conscious of your time, but I've got a couple of more questions if I may. They should be
Yeah.
reasonably quick questions. So I've been wanting to ask this question around overwhelm, because I can imagine throughout your journey an entrepreneur, and you get to the point where you exit with a 25 million sell. Before you got to that point, I imagine that there were lots of dotted periods of overwhelm where you're having to do lots of different things, learn different things, or manage different things, manage staff, lots of different situations, maybe cash flow. Do you have any tips for maybe other people that are entrepreneurs that may be feeling completely overwhelmed at the moment with a situation within their business?
Yeah. And it'll sound a little counterintuitive, because if you're overwhelmed, you feel like you should be spending every minute at your desk doing something for your business. But I find the best thing to do when I either feel stuck or overwhelmed or even defeated. There are times when you feel like, what am I doing? I mean, even now, I still wake up in the middle of the night like, what? No one's going to read this book. Like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? Right? Get out of your house or your office and talk to people. Get out and meet people. It is the solution to almost every malaise related to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I can't find the right vendor. I can't find the right employee. I can't find any customers. I don't know anything about this AI or whatever. Just get out, start making calls, start reaching out to people, go to networking events. And I'm an introvert, so this is particularly hard for me. But every time I've been stuck or overwhelmed, I know that that's the thing to do, and I do it, and it gets me unstuck and unoverwhelmed. It turns, you go from being overwhelmed to inspired and
Okay.
excited.
I love that. I
It
love that
really,
journey.
and people don't want to do it. I get it. I get it. I don't like picking up the phone. I don't like small talk or meeting. I like meeting new people actually, but that process is stressful
Mm.
for me. So, but it works every single time. You meet someone amazing who just changes your business. They make your business model work. I met someone like that early on, or I met my business partner that way. It works.
Okay, that's great advice. So overwhelmed, just do something, make a phone call, go to a networking event. There are a range of different things that we could do. We could watch, I guess, for people, entrepreneurs, watch your content as well, because your content's, fabulous for, this particular audience. I haven't asked you about the book. So what can we expect from the book, and where can people find your book?
The book will be available on Amazon and
Okay.
Barnes and Noble and Target and various places like that. Also, my website will have a link to the book. But the book it's an entrepreneurial memoir, and it's leans heavily on storytelling. A lot of the stories that I told today are told in the book and elaborated on. I write about the worst job I ever had after my first startup imploded and how that led to my successful startup. There's a lot of humor in the book. It's really more of a beach read than a business guide. So I'm happy it's coming out for summer because it's a light, fun read. But there are business lessons throughout for sure. It's meant to inspire other entrepreneurs from non-traditional backgrounds. I talk about my background and why I'm different from other entrepreneurs, growing up in a working class family, and also being the first generation to go to college.
Okay, wow. Wow, fabulous. And I think my last question, and then we lead on to the recurring question, is in your bio, I read out demystifying entrepreneurship. What does that mean to you, demystifying entrepreneurship?
It means to break it down into simple terms so that it doesn't seem overwhelming or inaccessible to people. So there's everything from all the jargon that's used. There's so much jargon that is thrown around in the business. Even sometimes I fall into it. M&A banker, VC, like
Yeah.
I always try to remember to not use acronyms because sometimes people don't know what that means. And there's no shame in that. You have to
Mm,
learn at some point. So it's answering questions that people are too afraid to ask because they don't want to look stupid, or
mm,
breaking down the jargon and making them see that this is nothing complicated. Like I talked about, the M&A process is like hiring a realtor. That right there
yeah.
is demystifying the M&A process. And if I'm telling people, like, I knew nothing about it when I started. I didn't even know what an M&A banker was or what they did. And I ran my whole process successfully. If I can do it, you can too. So that's what I'm trying to do, is to educate people in a jargon-free way that is not intimidating. Because I feel like there's a lot of gatekeeping that goes on in the venture capital funded entrepreneurial world. I hear it in my corner cafe when I go down to get my coffee. These guys are talking and using all this jargon, and it sounds very intimidating. Oh my gosh, they must be so smart. And they are, but you can do it too. You can have those conversations too, and you shouldn't be afraid.
Mm,
You can educate yourself by, watching my videos, and there are other people out there who have a niche. There's this woman named Nomiki Petrola who's created a product development lab for women, for developing apps and digital products. And she talks about the reason she did it is because a lot of women have families or other jobs, and they can't apply to Y Combinator in Silicon Valley,
mm,
in San Francisco, right? They don't have access to that world, but they can work with Nomiki and build a great product. And she's a professional product developer, right? So they can access her. So there are other people out there doing this work, and so I'm trying to elevate those folks too as resources, and just really send the message that, listen, this is who I am. Here are all the mistakes I made and the lack of knowledge that I had, and if I can do it, you can do it too.
because I do agree, entrepreneurship is quite intimidating. Sometimes when I say that word to people, it does have it's almost like a secret society for many of us. And when you don't know, when we think that we're not the right fit for that, then we close off a whole heap of opportunities. Then we might have an amazing idea, but we might think actually, well, you might think that bootstrapping or VC funding, and just there's any number of different things that might scare us.
Yeah, they
Oh,
quit before they get started is what I'm concerned about. And the other thing I'm concerned about, particularly in the US and the Bay Area, is the terrible image of the tech entrepreneur.
mm,
Uh, they do not have a good reputation in San Francisco at
really?
all on the rank and file citizens here. They're obnoxious. The highest profile ones are obnoxious and trying to work outside of, regular governing systems and think they should be able to do whatever they want. I mean, we see this on Twitter, right?
Mm,
With some of the most famous entrepreneurs in the world, they just behave like toddlers having a tantrum. If they don't get what they want,
mm,
they throw a fit and try to, disrupt traditional governance, for example. So that's the other thing that concerns me and why I want to tell my story and also
mm,
elevate other entrepreneurs like me, because I think entrepreneurs are amazing. I talk to amazing entrepreneurs every day who really deeply care about their employees and their teams. One of the things that people want to talk to me about the most is how do you get more money in the hands of your employees with creative benefits, variable compensation, so you're not taking on too much risk with, sky high salaries. How can you keep your teams happy and motivated? And that is, that shows me that they care about more than the exit, than the money. They really care about
mm.
building great businesses and having happy teams.
Which doesn't always get portrayed about entrepreneurs, that they, not that they don't care, but that they look at their teams and want to make sure that their teams are well looked after. And as you were saying that, I know that when you sold your business, you looked after your team. You created, I think it was your phantom equity plan. So
Yeah.
you were, your team were part of the business. They were, when the business was sold, they benefited from that as well.
Yep, that's a great way to it not only is a motivator and a well-deserved bonus essentially. It also, if you want to be completely self-serving about it, it enabled me to be completely transparent with our team about what our end game was, which was to
Mm,
sell the business and get everyone rowing in the right direction
mm,
towards the right metric, which was annual recurring revenue. A little more than a year before we sold the business, we rolled out that plan. We told our team, look, we want to be completely transparent. We do want to sell the business one day. We don't know if it's going to be 5 years from now or 1 year from now or 3 years, but we just want you to know that that's what we're trying to do. And that's why we're driving so hard towards annual recurring revenue.
mm,
And all of our goals in the next year roll up to that uber objective, which is to keep our annual recurring revenue increasing steadily. And so everyone in the company, whether they were in sales or, product, knew that that's what we were driving to. And, even those not in sales could help do that by doing something extra for a customer who needed it, or, being more responsive to that customer, or, working on some aspect of the product that would enable us to bring in more revenue, right? So it served two purposes: to reward the team, but also to get everyone focused in that home stretch of getting that ARR up.
I'm just thinking about everything that you did over that period of time, to from the start, that initial conversation you had, then the journey to the sale, to everything you would have learned across that journey. Can I just ask you a question around mindset? How did your mindset have to maybe upgrade itself along the journey? Was that something that you were conscious of, or did it just happen organically?
I was very conscious of it when I started the business, when I was just me on my own and I was still doing consulting. Um, my expectations were very low. I was raised to have low expectations so that I wouldn't be disappointed. I grew up with a scarcity mindset. I was taught not to dream too big, and if I did, I'd get like, "Well, who do you think you are?" kind of a,
Mm,
vibe from my parents. Like I was like an alien to them and a lot of the things that I wanted to do. And so when I started, I didn't manage the finances right because I assumed that it wouldn't go anywhere. So I was taking money from my consulting and like putting it into development for the product without even really tracking it, right? It was just kind of rolled into my consulting. And that was consequential later, like a decade later, when my partner is like, what is this? Like, how much did you put in and where is it on the, the financials? And it became a big mess. So looking back, I see that was a mindset problem. I wasn't dreaming big enough. And it continued all through the business. And by the way, my partner had the same kind of upbringing and mindset issues that I had. That was the one area where we were not complementary. We both, the biggest problem we had was thinking too small and picking everything apart versus seeing what was so great about it. We were very critical about every aspect of our business and always trying to make it better. That's the upside.
Yeah.
You're always trying to make it better. But a lot of it was being driven by fear of failure, and just this mindset that like, oh, this doesn't happen to people like me. People like me don't sell their company for millions of dollars. And so that was a constant battle. And by the way, it still is. I went through the same thing with trying to sell this book, just constant rejection. And that fuels my innate mindset issues, right? People like me don't get book deals, or I don't really know anything. No one's going to care about what I have to say. And again, the solution was just getting out and talking to people, putting out videos on TikTok and seeing the feedback is like, this is so helpful to me. This is so helpful. This is just what I needed to hear. And that's what keeps you going. And that's really the solution, I think, to propping up your own mindset deficiencies, is getting out and exposing the world to what you have to offer, getting feedback, refining what you're doing, and then getting that reaction of like, this is helping me in my business. This is helping me as I build my company. And then that just keeps you going. Because, you're always going to have naysayers. And they're usually going to be people who are not end consumers of what it is you're putting out there. If the end consumers are telling you to keep going and that you're great, that is helpful for giving your mindset a boost if you have a mindset issue, which I definitely did.
So you just triggered a thought. I was listening to content earlier by Stephen Bartlett, who's he was the founder of Social Chain, which was, I think, it was an influencer network, and he's got the podcast Diary of a CEO, and does very well in the UK. I guess globally it's doing very well. But he said that when he started Social Chain, he got people saying that's never going to make any money. It's just forget it now. Literally, people were ringing him up and saying that I'm not sure about that. I would park that one and focus on something else. And like you, he ended up selling that, making decent money, life-changing money. And now he's starting a podcast agency. I think his company's called Flight Studio or Studios, and this is his next venture. But he's still getting the same, maybe not the same people, but people saying, so I'm not sure. Actually, I'll come back a little bit. I think when he started Diary of a CEO, he did it with an idea that he wanted, similar mission to you actually, he wanted to give a platform to entrepreneurship, to really inspire entrepreneurship, open it up and give people the tools and the know-how to know that they can succeed at this. And his vehicle was to use podcasting as a platform to start that. But people said to him, you really can't make money in podcasting. And he just had to pretty much do what you've done, which is, I guess, thank them for their advice. But he thought, okay, this is in my head, I'm going to crack on and do it. And literally, I listened to exactly what you said by him today. So there's two people given the same advice. I think that's the advice that if you're an entrepreneur, or anybody actually, that you've got a dream or a goal, then stick with it.
Yeah, it's true. That's what I would encourage people to do.
Okay, lovely. So where can people find you? Where's the best place for people to find you?
I apologize for all the barking. There's something clearly going on out in front of my house.
I can't hear it, so it's a silent bark, hopefully.
The They can find me on my website has links to everything else I'm
Mm,
doing. So it's Sharon, middle initial K, Sharon K Gillenwater.com. And they can find me under that same handle on TikTok, on LinkedIn, on Instagram and Threads and Twitter.
lovely,
I'm all
lovely,
over the place, but
lovely.
um,
So you're on all the
yeah,
major platforms.
yeah. TikTok is really where I put everything. I tend to put more personal posts on there,
Mm,
or even things that are a little bit political that I wouldn't put on LinkedIn or
yeah.
Instagram, my main platform.
Okay, lovely. So we'll put everything on the show notes there, and I'll get a link to the book as well, so people can find the book. And you mentioned mentorship or coaching. Are you doing that? Is that something you're doing at the moment? Is that something you're
Yeah.
actively doing?
Yes, I am. So really everything I know is out there on TikTok. I've even
Yeah.
created playlists around topics like selling your company. I have a whole playlist on that. But I tell people, if you want to have a one-on-one with me and dig into all of these things related to your business, book an appointment, because when I went viral, like I can't talk to everybody who
Mm,
approaches me, but if there's someone who really wants to dig in, they can book an appointment with me and pay for an hour of my time, and I will dig into that and share, resources, documents, referrals, things like
okay,
that.
lovely.
So that's something that I'm doing, and I'm also looking for the right opportunities to take on a few companies that I advise on an ongoing basis in exchange for a small percentage of equity.
Mm,
That really interests me because I like to get my hands dirty
mm,
and really help support entrepreneurs. And I do occasionally come across a business where I'm like, I really believe in this business. Certain businesses are almost parallel to the Boardroom Insiders model, whether it's the way the product is structured or whether the way the business model is structured. And so those are the types of opportunities I'm looking for.
okay, amazing. Sharon, I've taken up more than your allotted time, so thank you. I love the conversation, so as long as you were happy, I was keen to keep it going. So thanks for your time today. Excited to read your book when it comes out, and yeah, so thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Lovely. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please do subscribe because it really does help us grow the channel. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow or scale your business, do look at Sharon's content. I'll put the links on the show notes, and your feedback is most welcome. So we're keen to hear about the things you like and equally the things you don't like. So you can find me at paul@myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me via the feedback page on the website. So take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.